No, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Okay, I guess I'm ready. Oh boy. Okay, I'm going to read from the Writer's Almanac. This is for Sunday, 29 January 2012, Garrison Keillor's Writer's Almanac, sponsored by the Poetry Foundation. It's the birthday of Anton Chekhov, born in Taganrog, Russia in 1860. He was in medical school and took up writing as a way to support his family. He wrote sketches and stories, never spending more than a day on any story. 2 years after he graduated, Chekhov got a letter from the critic Dmitry Grigoryev telling him that he was the most gifted writer of his generation and should take his work more seriously. Chekhov responded, quote, "Your letter struck me like lightning. I became very emotional upon reading it. I nearly cried. I understand now that if I have a gift, I should honor it, which I have not always done so in the past." Unquote. The next year, he published a collection of short stories called At Dusk in 1887, and it won the Pushkin Prize, a huge literary award in Russia. That same year, he wrote his first play. As he earned more from his writing, he didn't give up his medical practice. Instead, he treated more and more poor patients free of charge. Oh, God, love him. Is that not awesome? He said, quote, "Any idiot can face a crisis. It's the day-to-day living that wears you out." Unquote. Wonderful. On this day in 1845, Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven was published in the New York Evening Mirror. It was a huge sensation. Abraham Lincoln memorized it, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote a fan letter to Poe. He was paid $9 for The Raven, and it was extensively reprinted without his permission. But there's nothing he could do about it. He had written an unsigned article for the Mirror before about copywriting law, saying, quote, "Without an international copyright law, American authors may as well cut their throats," unquote. But there was no such law until 1891. His income in 1844 was $424. In 1845, he made a handsome $549. It's the birthday of writer and politician Thomas Paine. I like Thomas Paine. Born in Thetford, England in 1737, he moved to Philadelphia in 1774. He was 37, an unsuccessful writer, and he became wildly successful in the colonies with his long essay, Common Sense, in which he said, quote, "The cause of America is in great measure the cause of all mankind," unquote. The pamphlet sold more than 100,000 copies by the end of 1775, and the American Revolution began the next year. It is the birthday of novelist and essayist Edward Abbey. Born in Indiana, Pennsylvania in 1927. In 1944, he decided to hitchhike cross country knowing that he might be drafted when he turned 18, and he fell in love with the West. He did get drafted and spent a couple of years in Italy, then went to the University of New Mexico on the GI Bill. He worked as a seasonal ranger in the national parks, and he published his first few novels, including The Brave Cowboy in 1956, which was made into a movie starring Kirk Douglas, and Fire on the Mountain, which he wrote in 1968. Abbey was working as a school bus driver in Death Valley when he decided to write down an account of his time as a park ranger in the Arches National Monument near Moab, Utah. It was published as Desert Solitaire in 1968. Then in 1975, he published The Monkey Wrench Gang, the story of four irreverent, beer-drinking, gun-wielding, fun-loving characters who will do anything it takes to stop developers from coming in and destroying the West. The Monkey Wrench Gang was a bestseller, and its popularity made Desert Solitaire a bestseller as well. Edward Abbey became famous as an environmentalist. Here's a poem by Miss Emily Dickinson called Going to Heaven. Going to heaven, I know not when. Pray do not ask me how. Indeed, I'm too astonished to think of answering you. Going to heaven, as dim it sounds, and yet it will be done, as sure as flocks go home at night unto shepherd's arm. Perhaps you're going too. Who knows? If you should get there first, save just a little place for me, close to the two I lost. The smallest robe will fit me, and just a bit of a crown. For you know we do not mind our dress when we are going home. I'm glad I don't believe it, for it would stop my breath. And I'd like to look a little more at such a curious earth. I'm glad they did believe it, whom I have never found since the mighty afternoon I left him in the ground. That is Going to Heaven by Emily Dickinson. It's a poem in the public domain, and we read it not so great on the Writer's Almanac. Production credits are Garrison Keeler, the host. The writers are Betsy Allister, Priscilla Kinter, Heather McPherson, Holly Vanderhaar. The technical director is Thomas Schweitzger. The engineer is Noah Smith. Coordinators Nick Vetter, and permissions were obtained by Kathy Roach. Pretty easy permission since it was public domain. And as Garrison Keeler always says at the end of the Writer's Almanac, be well, do good work, and keep